To understand what Theravada Buddhism did to the Khmer Empire, you first need to understand what the Khmer Empire had been doing to its people for the past 400 years, because it had not been gentle. The peasants of Angkor paid taxes that would make a modern accountant wince. They worked the fields in brutal conditions, growing the rice that fed the city and funded the temples. When a king decided to build a new reservoir, and Khmer kings were always deciding to build new reservoirs, 200,000 peasants could be conscripted into the work gangs, spending years moving earth by hand under the Cambodian sun. The West Barai alone, that enormous reservoir we talked about in Part 3, is estimated to have required 200,000 workers for 3 years straight. Meanwhile, the king lived in a palace served by 4,000 women. A single medium-sized temple, not even one of the great ones, required a permanent staff of nearly 13,000 people. Administrators, dancers, professors, priests, cooks, cleaners, all of it funded by the people at the bottom of the pyramid who never set foot inside. This is not unusual in ancient civilizations. Inequality was the default setting of the medieval world everywhere you look. But in Angkor, it had been running at this level for a very long time. And the religious system that justified it, the God King, the Hindu temple hierarchy, the Sanskrit-educated elite looking down from their ceremonial heights at the rice farmers below, was starting to lose its grip. Enter the Theravada monks. They didn't arrive with armies or proclamations. They arrived on foot, walking between villages on pilgrimages, wearing simple robes, carrying begging bowls, eating only what ordinary people chose to give them. They lived in grass huts, they touched no money, they built no golden temples. And they told the farmers and the fishermen and the exhausted laborers of Angkor something that the Hindu establishment had never quite gotten around to saying, that their lives mattered, that suffering was not the natural order of things, that enlightenment was available to anyone, regardless of birth or caste or whether they could read Sanskrit. It's not hard to see why this caught on. By 1295, just 70 years after Jayavarman VII died, Theravada Buddhism had spread so thoroughly through Cambodian society that the king was no longer considered to hold any religious authority at all. The era of the God Kings, that system Jayavarman II had built from a hilltop ceremony in 802 that had held this empire together through wars and droughts and civil conflicts for nearly 5 centuries, was over. Just like that. The kings who followed tried various things. Some went back to Hinduism, some kept Buddhism, some switched, depending on the mood. None of it worked. The population had made up their mind, and no royal decree was going to unmake it. And without the God King system, the kings of Angkor were just men. Powerful men, certainly. Men with armies and treasuries and palaces, but men whose authority now rested on force and taxation rather than divine right. That is a much more fragile thing to build an empire on. The last great king of Angkor, Jayavarman VII, had died around 1220. From that point forward, something fundamental shifted. The great building projects stopped. The stone inscriptions, almost our only window into what was happening in the kingdom during this period, slowed to a trickle and eventually disappeared entirely. The last recorded inscription in Angkor dates to 1327. After that, silence. For the next 200 years, we don't even know the names of the kings who ruled. Historians call it the Cambodian Dark Ages, and the name fits. It's a black hole in the historical record, and we're left piecing together what happened from archaeology, from the accounts of foreign visitors, and from the evidence the land itself has preserved. One of those foreign visitors arrived in 1296. just as the darkness was beginning to close in. His name was Zhou Daguan, a Chinese diplomat sent by the Mongol emperor to spend a year in Angkor and report back to what he found. His account survived, and it is one of the most valuable documents we have about the final years of the Khmer capital. What Zhou saw was a city still functioning, still impressive, still capable of staging the royal procession that stopped you in your tracks. He described the king riding out on an elephant, holding a sacred sword, preceded by hundreds of palace women carrying golden candles and royal treasures, flanked by soldiers and musicians and goat-drawn carts covered in gold leaf. The spectacle was still there. The theater of power was still being performed, but Zhou noticed something else, something quieter and more telling. Theravada monks everywhere, walking the streets, moving through the markets, the austerity of their presence a direct rebuke to the golden excess of the royal procession passing right beside them. And in his notes, almost as an aside, he wrote that in the recent war with the Siamese, the country had been utterly devastated. The Siamese. The kingdom of Ayutthaya, in what is now Thailand, had once been part of the Khmer Empire. It had broken free in the centuries of internal chaos following Jayavarman VII and had spent the intervening years growing stronger, wealthier, and considerably more ambitious. Early French explorers who visited Ayutthaya would later compare it to Paris in size and grandeur. It was a serious power, and it had decided that the weakened Khmer state represented an opportunity. From around 1350 onward, the wars between Ayutthaya and Angkor became a regular feature of Cambodian life, and they were not going well for the Khmer. Territory fell. Border kingdoms that had paid tribute to Angkor for generations switched their loyalties to the rising Thai power. The empire that had once stretched from China to the sea was contracting, slowly but unmistakably, like a tide pulling back. The geography that made Angkor great now worked against it. Its wide, flat plains, perfect for rice farming, perfect for the canal network, perfect for feeding 1 million people, offered nothing when it came to defense. There were no mountains to shelter behind, no narrow passes to defend, no natural choke points where a smaller army could hold off a larger one. And the road network that Jayavarman VII had built across Cambodia, those well-maintained highways that had connected every town in the empire and supercharged economic growth for over a century, now served as invasion routes. The Thai armies could march across Cambodia at speed, and by the time they reached Angkor's walls, it was already too late. In 1352, the Thai king, U Thong, laid siege to Angkor. The city fell. A Thai puppet king was installed on the throne of the Khmer. The Khmer, being who they are, immediately began rebelling and eventually drove the puppet out and reclaimed the crown. But the message was clear. Angkor was no longer unassailable. It was a target. The final siege came in 1431. It lasted 7 months. 7 months of encirclement, of supplies being cut off, of the canals being blocked, of the slow strangling of a city that had once been the center of the world. We can only imagine what those months felt like inside the walls. The drums of the besieging army audible day and night, the food running out, the knowledge that no relief was coming. After 7 months, Angkor surrendered. The Thai forces sacked it completely. Statues, treasures, craftsmen, court dancers, all of it carried back to Ayutthaya. The ancient capital of the Khmer Empire was stripped of everything that could be moved. The Khmer eventually drove the Thai occupiers out again and reclaimed their throne, as they always did. But this time, something was different. This time, even after the enemy was gone, the king didn't go back to Angkor. He moved the capital south to the area around modern Phnom Penh, where the rivers offered better access to coastal trade and the terrain offered at least some defense against attack from the west. Angkor was abandoned as a capital. For a city that had been the beating heart of an empire for 600 years, this should have been the end of the story. And in many ways it was. But it wasn't quite what finished Angkor completely. Because cities can survive losing their political status, they can survive wars and sackings and occupying armies. History is full of cities that were conquered and rebuilt and conquered again. What Angkor couldn't survive was what was coming next. Something that had nothing to do with armies or religion or political power. Something older and more indifferent than any of those things. The climate was about to change, and the water system that had made Angkor possible, that vast, intricate, interdependent network of canals and reservoirs and channels that had tamed the monsoon and fed 1 million people, was about to face something it was never designed to withstand. That is the final chapter, and it is, in its way, the strangest one of all.
After day, the song remains the same, writing our history in a living flame.